Hi there, welcome to this build of a 45-inch wingspan Quiver. Now the Quiver is a scaled down version of the iconic 1930s Quaker. Now we're building this Quiver from a great set of plans that we downloaded from the OuterZone website, and there's a link in the description below these videos where you can get these plans. Now as you can see, this plane is more or less finished. There's very little to do with this now. We've got it covered we've got the fuselage covered, and that finished in the last video. And in this video now, we're just going to pull everything together to get it ready for the airfield. If I take the wings off, we've got the tailplane to glue on because that hasn't been glued on. It has been set up, and there is a kind of a tongue and groove set up here so we can fit it precisely, but we just need to make sure that we get it level in relation to the wings. We also need to fit the servos and the linkages for the back, and we've got to get the radio gear in, the undercarriage and the engine. It's going to be a really exciting episode because, I mean, just seeing this together now, I feel really excited and just can't wait to get it finished and get to the airfield. But it'd be really good to see it with the engine in, the wheels on, and just in its entirety. So I've been really looking forward to this stage. Now the first thing we need to do is to get the servos fitted in the back, and I'll show you what I mean. Now when we mocked up the CG with this, we found that it was quite nose heavy because we've got a slightly larger engine, and it's actually quite a long nose, and the engine is quite a way forward from the CG point, which is about here. And to compensate that, we decided to put the two servos right down under the tailplane. This still gave us a lot of play with the battery to move it forward or backwards to get the final CG. But we now need to cut the covering to fit these servos into the tail like that. And it's the same on this side. We've got another slot there. And it's best that we do it now because as soon as we get the tail glued on, we're going to kind of lose access there, because I want to cut this and then iron down the laminating film onto the balsa to get that nicely sealed around there, and I may even just polyurethane around the inside, which is the same fuel-proof covering that we've been using on the tissue. Now once we've done that, we're then going to set this up and we're going to epoxy the tailplane into place, and that's a really tricky job. No, it's not a tricky job, it's an easy job. But it's something that we have to get right, because if we glue it wrong, we're kind of stuck really, and there's no going back. So we really need to set that up precisely and get it right first time. Once we've got that done, we can get the linkages and everything else fitted. So let's get those servos fitted first. Right, I've now got those cut and sealed around the edges. I literally just cut the film and tissue, folded it down and ironed it in. Where the edges are quite small here, I used a hot screwdriver to act as an iron just to make sure that was down properly. I've then gone around the edges where there was little bits of balsa showing and just polyurethaned in some little slithers of tissue, just neaten it up a little bit. Now I haven't put the servos in. I'm not going to do that until I've glued the tailplane on, because the epoxy could drip through that slot onto the servos and glue them in forevermore, and I really don't want that to happen. So I'm going to put a little bit of tissue in there, paper towel, just to catch any epoxy that drips through when I glue that in place. Then I'll take the tissue out and we'll be done. So I'm going to set this up now on the bench, and we'll have a look at that just before I glue it. Right, well I've now got this set up and I'm ready to start epoxying the tail assembly onto the fuselage. And I say I'm going to epoxy it. It's going to be a 30-minute epoxy. Much better to use that so I can manipulate it, make sure it's right. I've got plenty of time, I'm not rushed. If I try and hold it in place and CA it, it could all go horribly wrong with no chance of correcting it. So epoxy for me is a good way to go. Now I've got the tailplane set up so it's more or less horizontal, level, front to back, side to side. And I've got the back of the fuselage on a block of wood here. I've got some steel blocks here just holding the fuselage solid, and some blocks at the front because we don't want it to move around while we're trying to set this up. I've got the wings on, and what we need to do is we need to make sure that we not only get the tailplane horizontal, but more importantly we need to make sure that they are parallel to the main wings. Now I know there's a dihedral here, but if we imagine a straight line through the wings, we need to have the wings and the tailplane parallel. We really don't want the tailplane to be crooked. It just needs to be lovely and parallel like that to get a good flying model. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to eye this up from the front so that we can just basically about 2-3 meters in front of the fuselage, and we'll just move our head up and down and we'll see the tips of the tailplane just coming into view below the wing, and that's how we'll be able to tell if it's set up right. Now it doesn't matter at this stage if the tailplane is square in relation to the fuselage. We're going to ignore the fuselage. It's all about getting the wings and the wing and the tailplane parallel. And we can see here from the front that view that we're going to have to make sure we get this right. And as I said, if we just move our head up and down, we can see the tips of the tailplane coming in and out of view, and that tells on either side, and that tells us that we've got it right. Now we've got this set up, I'm going to get that epoxy mixed and we will get it glued. But it's important to check it after we've glued it, not just walk away. In that 30 minutes it's setting, I'm going to keep an eye on it and make sure it doesn't drift one way or another. Because as I've said probably a couple of times, once it's glued, and it'll be very difficult to go back. Right, I've now got the tail assembly glued on and it's nice and solid and it's gone on lovely and square. And you probably can't see, but there's just a glisten of epoxy here, and the same on the other side, which shows that as we brought the two surfaces together, the epoxy just squeezed to the edge there, which is absolutely ideal. We didn't want too much coming out, but we want enough to coat both surfaces. I've got both of the servos in now, and I'm just thinking about coupling them up to the elevator and the rudder. I've got my servo tester connected up just off camera. I think you can just see it there in the corner, and we can just see that's operating there nicely. I'm going to use 1mm music wire to connect to a horn on the control surfaces. Now I hadn't got a horn of the right size. I wanted something really small, and I'd only got these fairly big ones. I could have ordered some and waited 2 or 3 days for them to arrive, but I've actually cut one of these down, one of these big ones down, to make something smaller like that. And I'm going to drill in a couple of holes. These big ones, they were just so sloppy as well on this 1mm wire that they just wouldn't have been a very good, I can't get that on there now. Oh, there we go. It would have been really sloppy and not a very good connection. So these will be ideal. I'll drill 1mm holes and that will fit really nice. So I'm going to get that bolted on there, and we'll do the other side, and we'll come back and have a look once we've got these servos connected up and the control surfaces working. Right, I've now got the servos and the control surfaces connected up, and we can just see those both moving together with my servo tester. I've set these up for quite a lot of movement. The rudder's certainly full movement. In fact, it's slightly over full movement. And once I get the radio in, I will obviously set these up properly. But good to have the movement there and see those working really nice and smoothly. Well, a little bit juddery, but that's my servo tester. Every time I get to this point in a build, I usually say I'm going to have to get a new servo tester, and I never do, but I will do one day. We can see there the controls on for the elevator and if we turn that over, we can see the controls there for the rudder. Now on top of the elevator, I've just made a very small plate to hold the bolts, stop them pulling through, and that's just made out of a black what's it called, epoxy board, you know, like you have with circuitry. So I just thought that looked nicer than having a big white square, something sort of fairly innocuous. So I've got the switch in, ready for the radio gear. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to get the landing gear on, I'm going to get the engine in, and I think that's it. I'm going to get the wings on, and I'm going to see where the CG is before I put the battery in, because if you saw the previous or an episode a few weeks back of mocking this up, I've put the battery in a piece of foam like this, and this battery will basically slide from the fuselage there up to here, and if I want to I can even put it right in the front. So I'm going to mock this up and see where the CG is before I fit this. So I will get on and do that now, and we'll have a look once we've got everything on except the battery in. Well, you can see the big grin on my face. I'm really excited to see this all together as one now, and I think it looks really good. Before we get to the issue of the CG and the balance, one thing I should mention, which I've kind of not been thinking about or avoiding thinking about, is on the plans it shows a little tail skid, just a little bit of bent wire, and I can't decide whether I should be putting that on, literally just to lift the back up that much. I think it's not the weight, because it's a small piece of bent wire, but it just seems something that's going to get ripped off or damaged. And I fly off a grass field, so the chances are it could get caught. I could put a little bit of a balsa keel, but I don't know. I'm kind of in two minds, and I'll probably think on about that. I'm not sure just having that little bit of difference will make any difference. But anyway, that aside, so just if you build this and you see the keel, you know that I'm indecisive. Now we've got this mocked up totally, and everything is on this now except for the battery and the receiver. And as I said, we can move this around, so I thought it'd be useful to see where the CG is now, and that'll let us know where to put this, and we can balance it properly. Now if I just put my fingers under there, now I would say that's not bad. I think it's slightly nose heavy, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I think we're not far off the mark there, which is actually really pleasing. And I think having those servos in the tail really has made a difference with this. So I'm going to get this just behind the CG, I think. So I think we're probably, let's just try this again. So about there, that may be a little bit better, but I'm going to get the battery in now, and we'll balance it up properly so we get it absolutely right. There's no point in risking the CG not being right, so I'm going to get that in now, and then we'll have a look at the finished model, and it'll be interesting to weigh it as well, because I'm intrigued as to how heavy this is now. Well, I've got this all pulled together now, and I'm really pleased with the outcome. I've got the CG spot on, and you can see from looking inside the cabin I've had to move the battery and the receiver right the way forward. In fact, the battery is against the firewall, and I guess what we're doing is we're paying for the covering that we've put on the back here, and of course we have got those servos, both the rudder and the elevator, down in the tail there. But we did leave ourselves enough scope to move the weight forward if needed, and that's paid off. And you can see there on my fingers that's looking quite nice. So I'm really pleased with that. I mean, the true test will come when we take it to the airfield and we actually see how it flies, how it glides, how it climbs. And it may be that actually we need to add a little bit of weight, take a bit of weight out, tweak it a little bit to get it just right. But I think we've got a good starting point. So what we're going to do now is have a quick look at the weight. At the end of the day, we can't alter the weight now, but it's quite interesting to see how this has come out, and it just kind of informs us as to whether it's going to fly nice or whether it's going to be a bit of a brick. Now this is coming in at 578 grams, and I think that's actually pretty good. I'm quite pleased with that. It doesn't feel heavy when you pick it up. It feels like it should do, nice and light. So I think this should fly really well. Now we've got the controls linked up, and I'll just get my transmitter and we'll have a quick look at the control surfaces. Okay, so if we switch the transmitter on, and we've got a little wire switch here which is connected to the switch inside the fuselage to keep it away from the oil, and I have this so I just press it in to switch it on. I know some people like to pull it to switch it on, but it's just what I prefer. And we can see, if I just put that on a piece of paper towel, and can we see that? No, I'll hold it. And we've got the rudder and the elevator both working really nicely. So I'm quite pleased with that. We've also got dual rates, so we can have maximum rudder throws and maximum elevator throws, or at least larger elevator throws. I find with these kind of free flight radio assist models that you need to have a lot more rudder once you've cut the engine and you haven't got that forced airflow over the rudder. So it's good to have dual rates. Well, I'm going to draw this video to a close now, and all that's left is to wait for that nice calm day. There's no point in taking this out to the field and risking it on a windy day, because at the end of the day, if it doesn't fly very well, we're not going to know whether it's too windy or whether it's a problem with the plane. So we need to give this plane the best chance that we can on that maiden flight, and I hope you'll come back and see how we get on. It's going to be really exciting to get this plane flying. Now, I hope you've enjoyed seeing the build of this. If you haven't seen all of the build videos, if you have a look on my playlists, and all the videos will be there, and you can see how we went through this build step by step. So anyway, thanks very much for watching, and come back and see how we get on that maiden flight.